Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, I want to go over my thoughts and experiences playing Diablo 4 in its release date. I want to let you all know, first and foremost, that I received my copy free, thanks to a promotion that Blizzard did. But I'll be reviewing this game as if I had spent $70 for the game. I was gifted the Ultimate Edition, just to be clear though. So, I was not very enthusiastic for the game, mainly due to me lacking the nostalgia that a lot of my peers had, because I did not play Diablo 2 when it was released, as I was only a child at the time. I also completely dodged Diablo 3 as I was introduced into the ARPG sphere with Path of Exile, so I never felt like as though I needed to play it. So my standpoint on this subject is unique, as most people coming into this game have either played Diablo 3 before or have played Diablo 2 when they were younger. Before I start talking about Diablo 4, let me make two things clear. First off, I'll be ignoring Blizzard as a company. I also don't really like talking about politics and sensational topics in my videos, as I feel it drags me away from what really matters to me, the actual gameplay itself. My personal opinions of Blizzard don't really matter here. The second thing I want to make clear is I am not a very casual person when it comes to video games, specifically RPGs, which is important for our discussion later. If you look through my upload history, I have played other RPGs very extensively and enjoyed most of them. Now, with those out of the way, let's talk business. Diablo 4 is not meant for me. I am someone who plays games to get intellectually stimulated, and this game isn't supposed to provide that. The game is supposed to be more or less a super casual take on the RPG genre, which is, to be honest, a very good selling point and will lead to the game doing very well in terms of money. Time and time again, I have heard people tell me they couldn't get into Path of Exile or Last Epoch because it was too complicated. So this is the perfect game for them to get into so they can have an easier ride into the whole genre. So before I start talking about what I don't like about the game, let's get the positive stuff out of the way. Okay, now that's done, let's talk about the bad stuff. No, I'm just joking. Let's be serious, there are good things about this game. The game itself is beautiful. The animations feel like they put a lot of work into them. The campaign itself was way more interesting than I thought it would be, especially since the fact that I don't really play games like this for the story, as they usually have bad ones or they're just not worth looking into, as that's not the selling point of the game. Other than the fact that you're constantly dragged behind Lilith's rampage, it was okay. I enjoyed it. It was not bad. It's definitely much higher tier than I would normally, rate most campaigns in ARPGs. But I'm not surprised about this at all, because when they actually do stuff and make things in regards to the single player experience, Blizzard, as a company, does well. I'm pretty sure what happened was Bobby Kotick stole the Overwatch 2 single player team and forced them to work on Diablo 4 instead, because this was definitely some good stuff and they definitely had some work done here. I like the attempt at making a slower RPG. I think in some aspects they did a better job than Last Epoch did, and that game was trying to be slower than Path of Exile. I don't know how to explain this feeling, but whenever I play Path of Exile or Last Epoch, I have this voice in the back of my head telling me to go faster and faster. I think this is because I take Last Epoch and Path of Exile way more seriously than I did Diablo 4. So maybe if I took Diablo 4 seriously, then I would eventually feel this way as well. But the thing is, it doesn't really have the aspects to make me take it as seriously. Because in Path of Exile, it's like a currency per hour game, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy it, right? You know, you make currency and you're good, right? Well, with Last Epoch, with the way that objective rushing is currently, most of your grinding ends up happening outside of the monolith of fate instead of being inside of the echoes. So that means that the faster you are getting through these echoes, the more you'll get per hour, which of course makes it, feel like as though I have to go faster. Both Diablo 4, it kind of hit that balance where I didn't feel like I was punished for taking my time. I felt like as though, I had time to actually kill stuff and I didn't have to, take it as seriously. But we'll see. Maybe if I end up taking the game more seriously, that will change. So I thought I was going to hate the open world aspects injected into the game. Let's be real, I hated most of them. But the one part I enjoyed was specifically Helltides. I enjoyed the idea of having an area of the map become invaded, and you have incentives to go there and kill everything, get aberrant cinders, which are like the materials, and then of course target farm chests for whatever pieces of gear you specifically needed at the time. I think in the modern RPG space, a lot of combat is within instances. This was very refreshing to walk around with a large area of the map to fight in and do side quests just for extra aberrant cinders, right? And my opinion on this, I like it when game developers, they repurpose parts of the game and gives it enough of a spin that it's still fun. But I believe most game developers don't do this enough, where they don't recycle things in the right way enough. What do I mean by that? Well, like Diablo 4, one of its biggest strengths is it has such a big map. They worked a lot on this map, putting everything on it, putting all these like little side quests on it. Let's make it better by adding an event where the player has to actually go out and do these said things, right? And let's make it an endgame activity, because you do need to do these to get the Forgotten Souls, which allow you to craft a bit more than you wouldn't be able to, right? And all of that combined means that you have another endgame like activity that is enjoyable, while also not taking much effort on their side to make, I think, at least from what I believe. So I think like other game developers should look at this specifically and try to replicate this in some way, or at least try to use things in a better way, if that makes sense. Now, my only problem with these is when your character is progressed enough through endgame, they start to feel like a joke difficulty-wise. So I would hope in the future we could get multiple zones conquered by Helltides, but each one with a different difficulty level and better aberrant cinder drops for that difficulty. It could also add another layer of progression to a game that is lacking in that aspect. Okay. That's the end of the good stuff. Let's talk about the bad stuff, and it's a list. So I want to divide this part into two sections. Objectively bad things about Diablo 4, things that the whole community agrees that are bad. And then the other part is going to be things I believe that are bad, or just things that I dislike and are not for me. This part will be focused on just my opinions of the game. The first objective thing I am bringing up is crowd control and its implications for the rest of the game. To be very brief, in the endgame, as you start pushing into nightmare dungeons, you will start to notice a problem, and that's enemies either freezing, stunning, or restricting your movement. This feels devastating every time it happens, especially in a game where the combat is significantly slower. Most of your defenses come from dodging things manually and just not getting hit. So when you have multiple cold enchant elites keeping you frozen, it's hard to actually play the game and of course, have fun. In Path of Exile, there is the same kind of issues, but there's also non-class specific ways of dealing with said issues. You can get 100% freeze avoidance many ways, from your gear, your pantheon, like ascendancies. There's plenty of ways of dealing with it. Or you can just become immune to stuns or build enough defenses to not get stunned often. You can get phasing so that you aren't body blocked by enemies constantly. Like, there's just a lot of different things to fix them. In PoE, it's simple. You have a problem, and the game gives you plenty of solutions for them. In Diablo 4, it's significantly worse, as you simply have a limited source of ways of fighting these stuns or freezes, and a lot of them have long cooldowns. You have Unstoppable. That is it. And the problem is, the spread of unstoppable sources is very thin, and also limited to specific classes. Only a few classes can get infinite unstoppable without insane investment. Rax, someone popular in the Diablo 4 community now, made a video on this topic and talks about it in more depth. So I'm going to be linking his video down in the description. If you want to know more about this, I would heavily suggest watching that. During the recent Diablo 4 campfire, their like Q&A session thing, this issue wasn't even mentioned. So I am hoping that it's already something they plan on fixing in the future, as it is definitely one of the most frustrating things keeping me from enjoying the game fully, and definitely one of the reasons why I don't even want to log in right now. The second objective thing I want to talk about is the insane Renowned and Lilith altar grind. This was brought up in that fireside chat I mentioned earlier, and they have plans to change these aspects slightly. But my problem is, it kind of just feels tacked on. A lot of the Renowned grind just feels like extra padding. Right now, there isn't too much of a diverse endgame experience, so of course, to make sure people take longer to get to said endgame, they need to add more things to do. Because if this Renowned grind wasn't in the game, you would finish the campaign at level 50 and then only have Nightmare Dungeons and Hell Tides to do, which would have made reaching endgame too quick and made people burn out quicker, which is, of course, bad for retention, which is very bad for games like this. In Path of Exile, you have the Atlas grind. You want to finish your Atlas to get all of your Atlas skill points, but this happens naturally as you progress through endgame. While in Diablo 4, it just feels like an insane amount of chores to do. When I was doing part of my Lilith altars and Renowned grind for my first playthrough of Diablo 4, I spent most of it watching long YouTube videos and series on a totally legitimate site that I won't name here, but it rhymes with Miss Baname. The reason why the grind in PoE isn't as bad, while the grind in Diablo 4 is bad, is the difference of when you are doing it and how you are doing it. When I'm finishing my Atlas, I'm also gaining upgrades, dropping currency to invest my character, and then while I'm farming Renown and altars in Diablo 4, I spend most of it riding a horse from point A to point B. I don't even gain Glyph XP, which is one of the main endgame grinds. Sadly, I don't see this changing too much. Sure, they might make the grind shorter or less tedious, but it seems like this is one of the main endgame grinds, and I'll be honest, if I had to repeat this every season, I would just quit, as I have better things to do than just chores. I could just do them in real life instead. Now that the objectively bad things are out of the way, I cut a few because this video would be way longer than I want it to be, we can talk about the things I specifically dislike about the game. Now, these aren't going to be bad things necessarily, but they are things I don't like about the game. An opinion, you would say. So if you don't agree with some of the things I list here, that's okay, because that's the purpose of opinions and discourse, is to be different from everyone else. Okay, build diversity is very lackluster, and not by a little, but by a lot. A staggering amount if you were to compare it to other games in the genre. A lot of people complain about build diversity in Path of Exile, but I implore those people to play Diablo 3 or Diablo 4 for a bit, then come back to me, as I am sure that would change their tune. Now, this problem is due to a few factors. The first thing being that unstoppable thing we were talking about earlier. Your class only has one way to break stuns and freezes. Just get screwed, man. If it's on a long cooldown, get screwed even more. It really does limit the kind of skills you can use in endgame because every necromancer needs to have blood mist. Every sorcerer build I've ever seen needs to have that ice armor. Every single class is pigeonholed into specific skills because of this mechanic.
Diablo 4 is all about player choice.
What? Now, another part of this problem is resistances. It leads to one of the main intended ways of becoming tanky to be absolutely worthless.
It'll give you a difference in damage reduction just from cold for 6.8%. So that makes absolutely no sense to me. How is that?
If you want to see how depressing resistances are mathematically in the current state of Diablo 4, I'll be linking a video by Crip where he goes into detail of how deep this rabbit hole goes. But TLDR, Sorcerer and Necromancer's main stat is intelligence. This means that they gain more damage by stacking it, which is one of the main ways of scaling yourself into endgame. Most builds end up getting upwards to 500 to 1000 intelligence, which is well over 50 to 100% more damage. Now, this is a fine investment, but stats are supposed to give other things as well. Like for instance, intelligence gives resistances as its main bonus. This is absolutely worthless currently. If it was good, then your Necromancer or Sorc wouldn't be paper tissue in endgame. This leads to classes that scale off at dexterity or strength to be much better, as they either gain base crit or armor, which are significantly better stats than just resistance. But I could keep going. I could talk about how bad minions are. I could talk about Druid and how you need to be in a Druid form to be competitive in endgame. I could talk about every Warpath character needing to use Gores. I could talk about Sorcerer and all of its problems, but that's the problem. The game is designed that there are only so many things you can do, and will be able to do in the future probably. In Diablo 3, the set problem caused a lack of build diversity, and I doubt Diablo 4 will escape these trappings easily. That's the price they pay to appeal to a casual player base, is less fun in the build diversity department. Now, this is amazing to a lot of people. This is not necessarily a bad thing, as all they have to do is look up a macro guide and follow it to a T and not have a single problem playing the game. But for people like me, who actually likes to think and innovate when putting things together for a character, this leads to a very dull experience. It's not like the other options are worse, it's just they don't exist. Now, the game has not been out for long. The game will probably get a lot of content to fix this problem. But this game costs $70 up front. I could go play Path of Exile, which after some investment to stash tabs, which usually around like $40 in value, or I could go buy Last Epoch, which is like $40, I think. I could get a much better experience when it comes to this specific thing, build diversity. Now, this is the main part of why I say that the game wasn't designed for me, which is completely okay for it to be. I am not the center of the world, and not every game released in the market will appeal to me, of course. This is actually just amazing for a lot of the people I know. In Diablo 3, there was a large majority of people who would play the same build every season start and enjoyed it heavily. People like the familiarity, and sometimes it's not about creating a new build. It's about how I can push this build farther and master it quicker, which will probably be one of Diablo 4's strengths. That Bone Spear Necromancer you started on launch will probably be the exact same when Season 1 starts, or very similar due to just lack of differences between gearing options, lack of difference between the skill trees, just lack of difference in general. Now, this means that you don't need to learn the game again to enjoy it, and that is a good thing, just not for me. The second subjective thing is, of course, endgame. Nightmare dungeon grinding after your glyphs are maxed for a lack of a better term, a little boring. For the first few days, it's not bad at all. You're doing your hell ties, then doing nightmare dungeons in between. I'm not trying to compare this game's endgame to other games, but when you slap a $70 price tag on the box and also charge obscene prices for MTX in your store, then I'm going to expect something a lot more expansive. They'll probably fix this in the future as well, but right now, if you care more about endgame systems and player choice, that $70 could be spent elsewhere, right? Of course, I could talk about the insane gap between farming normal dungeons and nightmare dungeons in terms of XP gain, in terms of currency gain, and all of this and all that. But these are things that they'll probably fix in the future and probably is just a waste of my breath. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's talk about the question that is the title of this video. Is Diablo 4 a bad game? No. If I were to actually rate it objectively, it would be a solid 5 or 6 out of 10. It has its problems, but it also has its charms. Now, the problem is, due to the price of the game and the micro store, I have to bump it down even further. Sadly, I'm not enthralled by insane graphics. I care more about in-depth systems and stuff that keeps my brain pumping, and this is not Diablo 4's strengths. Its main strength is being a casual RPG that is meant to cater towards the largest bucket of people, which means that the game can't be too complex or it will scare away that casual audience. I could almost recommend Diablo 4 to a new player in the RPG genre, but I can't because it's expensive for what it is. In this day and age, with inflation rising and grocery prices at an all-time high, I can't recommend spending half a day's income on this. Now, this will probably be rectified in the future with every season as they add more and more things to do, but I hope they learn their lessons with Diablo 3, because if they play their cards right, this game could be amazing in the future, hoping that Blizzard doesn't screw it up eventually. Now, for me, yes, Diablo 4 is a bad game. I can only see it as a game I play one character per season for about at most a week. I can't really dive deep into it because, much like the kiddie pool, it's not meant for an adult to swim in. Now that I own it and I haven't paid anything for it, I will probably play every season because why not? It's a fun experience when you don't take it as seriously, but I seriously cannot recommend the game in its current state. I will probably revisit it after a few seasons and make a video on that. Now, does this mean you shouldn't enjoy the game? No! Enjoy the game. Have fun. That's all that really matters. If it's worth the $70 to you, then that's fine. It's just not what I personally enjoy. With all that being said, if you haven't already, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way of supporting my efforts here. Now, this has been Dread, off to go wait for ExileCon. Bye!